Hey everybody, happy Tuesday and welcome to another Techstrong TV broadcast. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon. Today is Tuesday, December 14th. Marching on to the end of the year. We've got a couple more broadcasts left, but we've got a fantastic one today. I'm so glad you're here with me. We're going to kick things off with a conversation between Alan and Ron Viter, who is the CTO and co-founder of a company called Oxeye Security. Oxeye is all about cloud native application security testing, and Ron and Alan talk about the need for a new approach to cloud native application security testing and how a lot of existing tools fail. So this is a great conversation, and I think as more organizations ken to cloud native technologies, this is going to be an even more relevant conversation come 2022. After that, Alan speaks with Alan Germansky, who is the CEO and co-founder of a company called Up9. Up9 recently acquired a company called MockLab, which created the world's most popular open source API mocking project, WireMock. And so the acquisition for Up9 is expected to expand its capabilities, its test automation capabilities, which use machine learning technologies to provide a modern alternative to regular API testing methods. So this is a great technology, and it's a great conversation. After that, we have the Haunted Hacker podcast. This is part 2 of a 3-part conversation that host Mike Jones has with Gary Mary, who is the CEO at Risk Profiler. And they talk about, as always, with the podcast, all things cybersecurity, including in this one, leadership and ways that leaders can build effective cybersecurity teams, and as well as the struggles, challenges, and successes in cybersecurity. So, as always, it's a great conversation. After that, we have a DevOps Unbound episode. This is an ongoing series here on Techstrong TV. This episode is titled DevOps Got Me Through It, and it's a very, very fascinating conversation about how organizations did pivot, and most of them successfully during at the beginning of the pandemic. They had to digitally transform their businesses seemingly overnight, and many of them relied on DevOps processes and technologies and cultures to get them through the transition. So this episode features hosts Alan Schimmel. That was easy for me to say. Alan Schimmel and Mitch Ashley, and they're joined by Tracy Reagan, who is with Deploy Hub, Brian Dawson with the Linux Foundation, and Stephen Chin of JFrog, and they all discuss how DevOps has helped their organizations grow and why DevOps is so essential to business. It's a great conversation. After that, I'm back with the news headlines for you. And then I have 2 conversations. My first one is with Orion Cassetta, who is the Senior Director of Product Marketing at SciCode. And we discussed the results of SciCode's recent Software Supply Chain Security Priorities Survey. Very relevant conversation, and there are some very fascinating findings in the survey. So I highly recommend you take a listen to our discussion, and includes ways that you can actually take a look at the survey yourself. So totally worth it. After that, I speak with Dave Gokenauer, who is the Senior Director for Cybersecurity at Insono, and we discuss the impact of the talent shortage on security risks. You know, for many security leaders, it is crucial to work closely with other departments such as HR and operations to ensure that security is taken seriously across an organization, including in recruitment. So we look at the talent shortage from many different angles within an organization, from the sheer fact that people don't exist to the fact that security should be considered in every department within an organization to kind of help make up the deficit. So, great conversation there as well. After that, I've got the webinar preview for you, and then I've got the view with Vizard, in which Mike Vizard speaks with Toolchain Labs CEO Benji Weinberger, and they discuss why developers need an easier open source build system. Totally worth checking that out, that conversation out as well. And so that is the lineup for today's show. It's a good one, guys, and I hope you will stick around and watch it with me. And we're going to get things kicked off right after these commercial messages. right, welcome back, everybody. Kicking things off today is a conversation between Alan and Ron Vider, who is the CTO and co-founder over at Cybersecurity. They talk about the need for a new approach for cloud-native application security testing and how existing tools fail. Great conversation. Let's go ahead and get to it now.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, welcome to another segment here on Techstrong TV. My next guest, I had the pleasure of meeting him and his co-founder out in Los Angeles about, I guess it was a month, maybe almost 2 months now, at KubeCon, Cloud Native Con. His name is Ron Vider, and Ron is the co-founder of a company called Oxeye. They're a new company based in Israel, app DevSecOps, AppSec background. He's going to tell you more about it. But hey, Ron, welcome to Techstrong TV.
Yeah, sure thing. Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
And it's our pleasure to have you on. Ron, in case I messed up your name, pronounce it right for us so we get it right.
Yeah, so my name is Ron Vider.
Ron Vider. Okay, I was good. And Ron, if you don't mind, I'm going to ask to start with, share with our audience a little bit about who you are, your background, how you came to be one of the co-founders here at Oxeye.
Absolutely. So my name is Ron Vider, like I just said. I'm the co-founder and CTO at Oxeye. I actually live in the cybersecurity landscape for over a decade. Since I learned how to hack websites when most of the web applications were vulnerable PHP apps back then. Yeah, and I built my first application security testing tools and fuzzers when I was 16. And this is mainly what I do since then. And in the past years, I'm more focused on the cloud security area. Yeah, and prior to Oxeye, I was the first security researcher in the CTO office in Orca Security until last October when I left to build Oxeye.
Excellent, man. You know, and it's funny, I hear you talk 10 years and doing this and that. I'm in security 20, 25 years, and there was no AppSec then, right? It was crazy. But, I mean, the whole world has changed. You know, look, we speak to literally dozens of companies, even many of them coming out of Israel, cybersecurity startups. Seems like everyone there wants to start their own company. It's an entrepreneurial startup country. But let's talk a little bit about what drove you to leave a decent job, right? A good career, and venture out, into a startup like this.
In my past, I like to do some hand job and with hands-on job, like to go to websites and to see what I can do with my skills. But along the road, I understood that I don't just want to be that guy who will do the technical stuff, but also the one that creates things and big things. And then this is when I understood that I want to build my own company. And for my background, from the security background, the cloud security background, I immediately understood that I want to build a cloud security startup. And I met Dean like 2 or 3 years ago. And we had a great connection together. So like we chatted and we met once a week. We did our ideation when eventually we came out with the idea for Oxeye.
Excellent. And, well, you want to talk a little bit about Dean as your co-founder. He's CTO, yeah?
I'm the CTO. He's the CEO.
He's the CEO. Gotcha. Why don't you give us, so similar background to you as well, though?
About Dean?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Dean is in his past, he started as a software developer. He worked as a software developer in Checkpoint and later then in Impera. After that, he relocated to the Bay Area as part of his job in Impera. He was a sales engineer for the cloud WAF solution. And after that, when he came back to Israel, we met and started to work together.
Great story. Good stuff. All right. So now let's talk. So we founded Oxeye. Let's talk about kind of, Oxeye's reason for being. What's behind it?
Absolutely. So Oxeye is a cloud-native application security testing solution. our goal is to find vulnerabilities in the custom code across multiple microservices and the underlying layers before they ever reach production in cloud-native applications. Now, you might ask yourself, why do we need a new type of solution that finds vulnerabilities in the code? Because it's a very well-known market. If you look on the application security testing market, you can look at it like 3 subcategories. We have the static tools that analyze your code and build graph based on that. We have the dynamic tools, the DAST solution, that are trying to attack your application like a hacker. And we have the interactive tools that are being instrumented in your application and analyze its behavior. Now, all of these solutions were built when applications were just a monolithic applications. And in the last years, we can see the shift to cloud native. Well, I think cloud native is de facto standard today. When we're talking about cloud native application, we're talking about microservice architecture, that each one of the microservices is running in a container that being managed in an orchestrator like Kubernetes and deployed on the cloud. It can be a public cloud, AWS, GCP, and Azure, or a private cloud like an on-premise. Now, this shift maybe changed the way application looks like, but it have a huge impact on how vulnerabilities looks like. Because in the past, vulnerability started and ended on the same piece of code. Like it started in the HTTP parameter, for example, in the HTTP request, and then it's going to multiple functions to the dangerous function, the SQL query functions, for example. But today, it can start on the API gateway, and then the microservice will get the inputs through that. It will write it to the message queue, and the internal microservice will read from the queue. And then maybe 2 hours later or 3 hours later, another microservice will read from the message queue or the S3 bucket, and the vulnerability is in there. So today, it's no longer just vulnerabilities, but it's vulnerable flows. They stretches on multiple microservices. Now, on top of that, in the past, the main parameter to understand the risk was the code. But now, the infrastructure configuration have a huge impact on what is the risk and what is the probability. Like the naive example is, does the security group expose the vulnerability to the internet? But we can even take it to the next level. And what is the permissions of the container? Let's assume that we found a remote code execution vulnerability on one of your microservices. Maybe it's a privileged container. Or we can even ask, what is the IAM role that is attached to the cluster? And maybe a remote code execution vulnerability or an SSRF vulnerability can lead to AWS account takeover or maybe GCP takeover that happened due to the mix between the vulnerability in the code and the way the infrastructure is configured. So to understand the actual risk and the probability for each one of the different microservices, you must take into consideration the entire flow and the infrastructure layers under it.
Understood. For our audience out here, right, especially like security folk, they're saying, okay, I get it, right? We're going to, understand the microservice and try to secure it. But for those of us in the audience who are developing in microservices, who are managing applications that are, architected in a microservices architecture, the real complication is it's not 1 or 2 microservices that you're doing this with. An application could literally have dozens of microservices running, in one application, let alone multiple applications. And so now you start to see that there's a problem, right? This isn't as simple as it may sound, right? Because when we need to manage the security of literally dozens, if not hundreds of microservices, if not thousands, across an enterprise, this isn't something you're going to do on a spreadsheet or you know what I mean? This is by hand. This is something you need a dedicated solution with.
I absolutely agree with you. And if we will look on different types of solution, let's look on the static solutions first. So the static tools will analyze each one of the different components in a static way separately. Now, it's maybe be easy when you have 2 microservices. You can give it to the AppSec engineer, and it will mix it together. But when you have 100 or 200 microservices running on each one of them separately is not good enough. It creates a lot of false positives and false negatives. This is for the static tools. If we look on the dynamic tools, they are just trying to attack your application from the external surface. They will send an HTTP request with a payload to your external microservice that simulates a hacker, and then it will analyze the HTTP response, and based on that, it can say if it's a vulnerable or not. But in microservice architecture, especially when you have a lot of microservices, the vulnerability may be in the internal ones, and there is no indication on the external surface whether it's vulnerable or not. So once again, it creates many false positives and false negatives. And the last types of solutions is the interactive tools that we said earlier. You need to instrument it into your running microservices. And first of all, installing an agent on 300 microservices is a very, very hard work. But on top of that, when you look on the new types of microservices in cloud-native apps, so in the past you had an HTTP server, but nowadays you might have a microservice that waits for messages on a message queue or S3 bucket, and all of the IS solution interactive tools are instrumented into an HTTP web server. So if you have a microservice that is not HTTP based, you just can put your IS engine in it. So once again, it will miss most of your vulnerabilities. So if we look on all of these solutions, you choose new types of solution that is dedicated for the new types of security issues, for the new architecture. And this is the only way to find vulnerability in your custom code in cloud-native apps.
Excellent. Ron, if you don't mind, I want to turn our conversation a little bit and talk maybe about like the business side of Oxeye. So you guys have developed this great technical, right? There's a real problem here you've identified, and you've engineered a solution that people can use. How is it packaged? How is it offered to end users? Where is Oxeye in terms of how do they interact in the market today?
Yeah, absolutely. So for Oxeye, we have two types of users. On one hand, we have the AppSec teams. They need to gain visibility to which vulnerability they have in their systems. So they will have their own dedicated dashboard. And the developers, for them, everything will be fully integrated with their existing systems, because I'm sure you will agree with me, developers today have many, many systems and many dashboards. We don't want to add for them a new dashboard. So they will receive an alert through Slack. Maybe we can open an issue in Jira, or we can even write a comment on the pull request on GitHub. So this is for the usage. From onboarding perspective, like if you want to use Oxeye now, all you have to do is deploy one component within your testing environment. It takes less than a minute. It is done by the DevOps, and there is no code changes to do that. In our vision, you will be able to do it on your own. You don't have to talk with a salesperson. You can just go to our website, download it, and apply it on your applications. So this is the usage of the product. And we're currently building it. We're planning to release the first version of Oxeye in end of January. We're currently working with our design partners. We have multiple design partners. Some of them are Fortune 200 companies. And in the end of January, all of you will be able to try it and use it on your own.
Okay. So right now it's a closed beta, basically, right? In January it'll be GA.
Exactly.
Excellent. And Ron, what kind of reception? I know you, like we mentioned in the beginning, right? You guys are at KubeCon, and CNCFCon is part of it. What kind of reception have you seen? What kind of feedback? What message are you hearing from the user base out there, from the community?
So what we hear from the community is the need for securing cloud-native apps, because when a security product doesn't work, it's not just creating false positives or false negatives. To create tons of work that is not really necessary. So when we talked with the community, you mentioned it earlier, we was in KubeCon, and we talked with security experts in KubeCon. They told us we just can't use the existing tools because they are not fit to the new types of application. They don't fit the new business logic, they don't fit the new architecture, and there is a real need for a security product that's dedicated for this cloud-native approach.
Excellent. Excellent. You know what? We're about out of time. Ron, for people who want to get more information, stay in touch for the end of January release, what's the website?
Yeah, cool. So our website is oxeye.io, which is OXEYE.io.
Just the way it's spelled on the screen behind you.
Yeah,
.io.
Exactly.
All right. Hey, Ron, it's nice seeing you again. Hopefully soon in person again. I know we're going to, well, who knows? But we're trying to go to the next KubeCon, which is Valencia in May. So maybe we'll see you there, if not before, at RSA conference or something like that. All right.
We'll see each other in both of them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ron. Be well. Ahead. Say hello.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Oxide.io. Check them out. If you're working on microservices, Kubernetes, this is something you want to definitely look into. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back with our next guest.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
All right, welcome back. Next up, Alan speaks with Alon Germansky, who is the CEO and co-founder of Up9, which recently acquired Mock Labs, which is the creator of the world's most popular open source API mocking project, WireMock. And so Alan and Alon talk about the acquisition, what it means for Up9, and how it's going to advance their test automation capabilities. It's a great conversation. Let's roll it now.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining us here on another Techstrong TV episode. My guest this episode is no stranger to those of you who watch Techstrong TV. I've been interviewing and following and friends with Alon Germansky for 5, 6, 7 years. Alon, of course, was the founder of BlazeMeter, open source testing, acquired by CA, which became Broadcom, and now it's been sold to Perforce and has a new home there. Alon, of course, left BlazeMeter and went off with some of the BlazeMeter team, actually, I think was involved, ex-BlazeMeter, and they started Up9, UP9. And he'll tell us all about it. We've been following UP9 since Alon first came out of stealth with it. And he's here today to give us an update on Up9 and some new news that came out last week, actually. And Alon, welcome to Techstrong TV, my friend. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Alan. Good being here.
It's good to have you on again. It's good to see you. Of course, we were just talking off camera. We saw each other in LA for KubeCon. That was almost 2 months ago, month and a half ago. Getting ready for the new year. Hopefully next year we'll be back out on the road if things go well. But until then, you know what, Alon, for people who maybe aren't familiar with Up9, UP9, tell us, give them a quick background. What's UP9 about? And I pronounce it Up9, but am I wrong?
No, it's Up9, and just kind of to clear some where the name comes from. So Up9 is all about reliability, actually reliability and security for developers, cloud native developers, right? Mm-hmm. And in reliability, there was always the problem of availability, right? And it is measured by nines. Usually, it's anywhere from exactly 5, 6 nines. So, our goal in life as reliability people is to up R9s. So up9 helps you, get a better reliability score.
Good.
So that's up9. Yes.
Yep. And so that's where the name comes from. But let's specifically talk about how you're helping developers and with security and so forth.
Yeah. So basically, we provide developer tools for Kubernetes developers, cloud native in general, but our focus is Kubernetes, to ensure their APIs perform reliably and securely, right?
Yep.
During development, we enable faster development with automatic coding, now with API mocking, the news that I'm about to share. Both can be used for testing and development, the automatic code wizard and the API mocking. And once in production, or even close to production, we provide API traffic monitoring that is used to detect API regressions and security vulnerabilities. Beautiful.
Excellent stuff. All right, you've laid the groundwork, my friend. I gave you the big build-up. Now you guys announced some news last week. Let's talk about it. Tell us, what was the news?
Yeah, so I'm so happy and excited to announce that up9 has acquired MockLab, London-based MockLab. For those of you who don't know MockLab, you probably know WireMock, which is the open source API mock project that basically the entity behind it is MockLab. So now MockLab, WireMock creator, Tom Ackerhorst, are all part of up9.
That's incredibly good news. Alon, I'm old enough to remember when companies would buy open source projects and the creators behind them, people would say, what? Why? Right? They're giving software away for free. Why are you buy? I remember back my friend Marty Roche, who had started SourceFire, right? The people behind Snort. This might be before your time, but probably not. And Marty bought ClamAV, the founders of ClamAV. And that allowed SourceFire to move from just doing IDS, IPS into sort of full-featured UTM, if you will, right? And that was a big step up with them. Also in the security space, vulnerability management firm Rapid7 was a good vulnerability scanner, one of many. Then they acquired the Metasploit project, right? If you remember Metasploit. And that immediately vaulted them right into AppSec and pen testing, and really made that company what it was, or what it's become. It's public now and everything else. So, clearly bringing in a quality open source project under the umbrella of your corporation can have a major effect on the ultimate success of the whole thing.
Yep.
Why is that true here, you think, or maybe true?
No, that's definitely true. It all boils down to what we do and how we do it. So we support a form of contract-driven development. I think that we all know cloud native. We hear about Kubernetes. As always, we think, hey, here's another step in the evolution of tech. But sometimes these steps are revolutions as opposed to evolution, right? And they require a paradigm shift, so to say, when you're developing new products, right? So if you move from the monolith with a single code base to a microservice environments, from dozens of APIs to thousands of APIs, right? You have to think differently, because the human brain can manage that much, everything that you can count with 10 fingers. But if you have 500 different services in your cluster, and Kubernetes is kind of the pioneer in microservice management, when you have hundreds of services, you have to change the way you think, you have to change the way you develop, you have to change the way you monitor to detect problems, right? So with that, we I would say came up, but no, it was there before. We adopted the concept of contract-driven development and provide contract monitoring, contract testing, and contract or service development. Okay. Mocking is a very essential part. When I'm developing a new service, right, I want other people to integrate with my service. I have to provide them with a mock, right? Otherwise, they'll always be dependent on my service. Okay, so that's kind of one piece of the puzzle that is essential for anyone who's developing a new microservice.
Absolutely. And of course, microservices kind of make the world go around, as do APIs, quite frankly, right? I mean, we live in a world of APIs and microservices. I reminded back to the CA days, right, where CA used to use the term API-driven economy, right, and stuff like that, and more true today than ever, really. Now, of course, Alon, you are an experienced open source veteran. You built a successful business that you exited from and is still thriving today around an open source business model. So you understand, right, how to keep the community happy, how to keep an open source project open and useful, at the same time being able to build a business model around it. What, if anything's different with OpenMock, or, what plans there to make sure the community feels, I don't, no pun intended, secure, right? That the rug's not getting pulled out from under them, that this will continue to be the kind of open source project that they want to be involved in.
Yeah, so as you said, we've been in this industry for quite a while, right? So our team, my team and myself, and now with Tom, we are all open source, advocates, developers. If before it was with JMeter, and now it was with WireMock. The thing is that today, with the developer economy, developers, that's the way to consume software today, open source. I mean, I don't know of any other way to enable developers, because they have to, it has to be fast. It has to be, at the developer discretion in terms of when to use, right? And the ability to change. Developers cannot deal with black boxes, right? Everything needs to be kind of white box. And open source is a great and successful model to go with it. I don't know, 5-6 years ago, open source was a poor man's solution, right? Something low cost compared to the bigger enterprise companies. Today, it's the go-to solution, and usually open source tools are better than any commercial tool because of the strength of the community that is investing and contributing. Now, we know that for sure, we'll only develop this and make it even more available with no hidden. Developers are always afraid that something is hidden there to make them pay money. We believe, from our experience with the enterprise market, is you invest as much as you can in open source. Right, your enterprise offering comes from the fact that you have vast quantities of storage, collaboration between developers, providing dashboards on top of what everyone does. But the basic stuff, the open source tools, are open source, available, and they have enough. They are rich enough not to get to a point where, hey, this is not enough, I need to have something else. But you can go on with open sources as much as you want.
Absolutely. Alon, I know the answer to this, but for our audience, the actual acquisition of an open source project, right? It's really the IP that you're acquiring, right? because something could be licensed under GPL or whatever open source license you use. People can use that. But under all the open source license, the creator, still retains the intellectual property usually, right? And there's rules about how to use the source and everything. But more importantly, or as important as the IP itself, the creator, the creative vision is an important piece of it. And I know you mentioned, I didn't catch his name, I apologize. But the creator of the project, his name, and it sounds like he's joining the firm here.
Yeah, Tom Ackerhurst, that's the creator's name. And in these you hear the term acquisition and you think kind of big company, small company, stuff like that. Up9 is not a big company. It's a fast-growing, still early-stage company, right? And it's more about joining forces with Tom. And you cannot buy an open source project. A true open source project has an Apache license or an MIT license that gives a lot of flexibility to use it, right? What you get is acceleration, right? We've integrated with YMOC being the most popular and the most modern API mock. We've integrated with YMOC long time ago. But through our discussions, we said, hey, why don't we join forces? We go to market together. We'll probably end up going far faster and bigger, right? So this is about joining forces of the intellectual property or the brain, the very large brain of the creator of YMOC and Up9, the rest of what Up9 has to offer, the monitoring, the machine learning, the automatic coding of it, right? And what you get is acceleration. You go to the market faster, you develop features faster, and you get happy customers earlier.
Excellent. Hey, my friend, we're almost out of time. So, again, these are not big public companies. Is this a closed transaction at this point?
Do you mean if it's a private and non-disclosed transaction?
Well, no, it's
yes.
private, I'm saying it's done.
Yeah. It's done last week. I'm so happy. We're super excited. And until now, we kind of kept it, hush-hush. But now I'm very happy to tell people about this and start doing things together with Tom.
All right. Hey, I wish you and Tom and the whole Up9 team a lot of success. You know what? I'm a fan. You know that. So I'm expecting big things from you guys, okay?
I'll definitely try not to disappoint you, and I'm a big fan of what you do as well.
All right. Alon Gramansky, CEO Up9, talking about their latest acquisition here, and continuing doing what they do here on Techstrong TV. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more. ContainerJournal.com is operated by MediaOps Inc., the team behind DevOps.com, Digital Anarchist, SecurityBoulevard.com, DevOps Connect, and DevOpsDozen.com.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Next up, we've got the Haunted Hacker Podcast. In this episode 2, or part 2 of a 3-part episode, we have Mike Jones, the host, speaking with Gary Mary, who was the CEO at Risk Profiler, and they have a conversation about all things cybersecurity with a heavy emphasis on leadership in cybersecurity and ways to build effective cybersecurity teams and so much more. It's a great conversation as always. Let's get to it now.
That's an awesome accomplishment as well, because I know with retail, I did a pen test for a huge global retailer out in California, and the amount of point of sales machines and just servers in general that were just horrid.
It's a hostile environment. It's so hostile. Oh my gosh.
100%. And when they have to go and dictate, tell the board, this is what we have, and this is what's going on. This is what the security test showed, and it's never a good conversation for them. And even in oil and gas, when I was in oil and gas, my CISO used to dread talks with the board all the time. He would come to me and say, "Give me something positive that I can hand to the board." So I would look and try to come up with something that was moving in the right direction, or that overshadowed a failure. But I sat him down, I told him, I was like, look, I know we need to report good things to the board, but we also need to talk about the things that we've struggled with and we've accomplished through that struggle. Be real about it. And I think that's one thing that a lot of companies don't do internally and externally. They're not real about their communication. Yeah. People want to hear those failures and how they got through those times, because it serves as a lesson to somebody else. Yeah. But yeah, in the culture is way different in the board. So I'm on the board of 2 companies in Europe. And when they first asked me to be a board member, I was shocked, first of all, because I thought, here's a guy that, I've helped build SOCs and I've led red teams and I've been a director of security, but I'm not a board member. I've never had that function. But then I realized that, it was strange. But then I realized that it wasn't really what I've done that they wanted me to be a part of. It's the way that I thought and the way that I looked forward. And I think a lot of boards, some of the boards that I've dealt with in the past, I think lacked that vision. They weren't looking forward. They were looking at right now. Yeah. What are we doing right now? Show me metrics. And if the metrics were bad, then everything was bad. But they weren't looking forward to some of those things that had bad metrics was a progression, and it wasn't a sprint. It was more of a marathon. Yeah. But to communicate that to a board, that's where the real skill lies, I think.
Yeah. It's not, it's not like a circus act. You don't have to get up on a ladder with a bullhorn or anything. It's not that. You can try that and it won't work. And you can try to, puff up your chest and think, because I'm Mike Jones, you're going to listen to me, but it doesn't really work that way. It really doesn't. And I think been on, and the one thing I think about the most from a board perspective was my very first board that I was on. It was completely changed my career. It made me understand that don't assume. And if you go in with this critical, we're not secure because you didn't give me any money, they're gonna call you Spock and kick you out.
Oh yeah. And anytime you talk money in front of a board too, unless you've got some diehard facts and a positive outcome for requesting the money, it's going to fall on deaf ears pretty quick.
Yeah. Look, these, companies, like I said before, for a company to grow, which by definition, if it's not growing, it's dying. And so for a company to grow, you have to have a certain amount of optimism. And that's what I love about these startups. I mean, I went from having, a lot of responsibility to just being in the startup world and loving it, because everyone is excited and everyone is pulling and everyone's optimistic. And a board, it has to be that way. And I mean, good, bad, and different. Certainly, you were talking about, give me something positive to say. I can distinctly remember feeling like a sellout the first time I went into a board meeting and said to myself, well, I gotta be positive, because if I'm not positive, they're not going to have me on the board, and they're going to throw me out. And I'm not even going to be a CIO. I'm going to be, working at Radio Shack or something at the time. And I remember thinking, it's not about being positive. It's about being part of and feeling that the same pain as everyone else, or the same, not really pain, that, we've definitely got some challenges, and we're going to do the best we can here. And I think one thing I did that was important, and I think I see a lot of this today, and I'm always sort of amazed, as you said earlier, that the same thing still goes on, is that, if you've talked to more tech environments or tech conferences or tech events than you have your own internal company, then you're part of the problem. If you're not giving your company as many talks, as many presentations, as many things about cybersecurity, but yet you're out at RSA or you're out at Black Hat, you're at DEF CON, you're part of the problem, man. You need to get back to your company. You need to give your company, a 2-to-1 ratio. Technologists talking to technologists is integral. It's so important. But if you're doing that and you're not talking to non-technologists, then you're part of the problem, man, because they are. And if you help them, then you're not helping yourself.
100%.
Yeah, I used to do that. I used to feel like, well, if I get an opportunity to talk at RSA, I've made it. I mean, I'm somebody. I've made it. But you should be talking to your board. You should be talking to your CFO, your CEO. You should be talking. I remember I sit with my CEO. And we used to have these conversations, and he would close his door because these are things that he thought he should know. And he asked me, he said, well, how does this internet thing work? And I was like, wow. And so we got our little yellow stickies out, and we had a whole wall full of stickies. In the end, we took them down. So I mean, that conversation with he and I, all of a sudden, I was part of his inner circle, just because I didn't go out and say, this guy's such an idiot. He didn't know how the internet worked. Right. Instead, I was like, yeah, this is cool. He now knew how the internet worked. Good, maybe for me, maybe good for the company. Those conversations are important. And if you're not having them with your CEO, but you are going out and you're giving the demonstrations and you're doing all these things in these different tech conferences, you need to get home. You need to go home. You need to take care of your own shop, because everything you take care of could take care of the whole industry.
And one of the things I did when I got to Blue Bastion, I think it was my second or third week that I was there, I actually gave a lunchtime talk on how hackers exfiltrate data through DNS. And these are some very green, SOC analysts that, that hadn't had the best training. And, they've gone through a couple leaders and just didn't have that person that wanted to help really teach them. Yeah. And the training program was just not there. And to me, a lot of people probably would look at it as a challenge, but to me, it was more of a blessing, because I got to start with a brand new, fresh group of people who were hungry. And one of my first promotions was I took a level 1 up to a level 2 and 2 interns the full time, because they were so hungry. They wanted that information. Yeah. And
they may have left there and gone and saved a whole company. Country.
Exactly.
A hospital.
Exactly.
It's so amazing. And that transference of knowledge is incredibly important. And if it's just technologists talking to technologists, one half of that equation is missing. And it's without that other half, we will never succeed.
And that's kind of why I wanted to do the podcast too, because we have all of these great leaders and we have all these people who help build what we know today as the industry. But how much history, how much, written down tribal knowledge do we have? And, where are these good conversations between some of these leaders that, people generations from now can pull up and be, hey, look, this is what they were talking about back then. Why are we still doing this?
I know.
To me, this was, at first it was just an idea, and now it's more like a history project for me, because I wanted to build something to leave behind, to bring people like you on to talk about your history and your knowledge and your experience, so that, maybe a generation or even now, someone can pick this up and go, oh, hey, that's pretty cool. Maybe I might try looking at that differently now.
Yeah.
So
before we came on, I wrote myself a couple notes. I was thinking, well, what do I want? What do I want to leave here? And what I really wanted to leave is if somebody watches this and then goes back to their company and, does something differently instead of just talking to the technologist, but instead sits down and talks to their CFO. I would love for someone who sees this to say, hey, I want to go talk to my CEO and say, hey, you know what DNS is? I mean, it sounds complicated, but and do you know what it does? It changes one thing and the butterfly effect, and you never know what's going to happen. So I'm with you, man. I wanted to do this. I wanted to talk to you, a brilliant thinker, and think about, what we can do differently. Certainly what we're doing today, which is we're just not transferring that knowledge as much as we should. The Kaseya, today it's a little bit more open, maybe. I don't know if that's, well, I don't know. I'm such I'm an iconoclast, but more than that, I'm such a suspicious guy. And so I hear it and I'm thinking, I wonder if that's really right. But I guarantee you, I walk away from it and I go to my own shop and I'm like, hey, can we look at do we have anything that's old? Tell me everything we have that's old. This is right after the Kaseya. The Kaseya, I don't know why, because it just really struck me watching their CEO give his mea culpa. Did you watch that?
I didn't watch that, but I heard the stories from it. It was actually pretty sad.
Yeah. So but at the same time, from their struggles, I went back and I said, listen, let's look at our legacy stuff and let's decide what we do and don't want. Just because it's legacy doesn't mean it's necessarily bad or it's gonna not live up to some sort of standard, but let's at least look at it. And I can tell you, because of Kaseya, there were a couple pieces of technology that we had to walk away from, not because it was directly related to Kaseya at all in any way, shape, or form, but we really needed to look at kind of what practices and what levels of code they were using. I mean, if you have an application that's using like a language that's not supported anymore, you should be using that. You shouldn't be using that product, and so it'll get you. I mean, so yeah, even from that, I didn't get anything from what he said. He did a fantastic job, like Academy Award winning apology, man. It covered all the bases, and I watched it and thought to myself, man, what would I do? I mean, it was so well polished. I'm liable to just say, look, we did our best and, we got unlucky or something, but this guy was very thorough. Yeah. And so, yeah, I think, again, we're kind of touching on the same subjects, but more than anything else is learning from other people's things. And Brian Krebs, of all things, I'm constantly finding things from Brian. And I'm like I send him little emails and things like that. And it's not, I don't think Brian would call himself a technologist, but he'll write something every once in a while. And I'll think, oh man, I need to go find out what the heck that is. And B, if we're doing that or if we're part of that. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And, along the same lines of Kaseya and stuff like that, doing incident response has really helped me. I hadn't done a whole lot of incident response until this year. And what I found the most interesting and kind of the most alarming is not so much the ransomware itself or the technical details. It's watching the company react to an event like that and what goes to their mind and how the company struggles and just the thought patterns behind the executives and how they address the situation. First of all, it's highly technical. And a lot of the C-levels that were involved don't really know that much about it. They're a little bit more removed. So they didn't have that technical knowledge. And then they're dealing with people who are unseen with vulnerabilities that they don't know. And just watching that pain and seeing how they come out the other end, and they come out, knowing more powerful defensive stance, and just it helps build their confidence. But in order to build that confidence, they had to go into something that wasn't within their comfort zone. They had to struggle. Had to struggle, had to feel some pain, had to work under fire. But I think that we all need to do that. Not everything in this industry has ever been rainbows and butterflies. I mean, I've worked for more startups than I have big corporations, and there's a reason for that. Because I learn more there. There's more challenges. There's more struggle when it comes to building your service or building your product. But there's also a lot of freedom there too, because you get to build it the way that you want to build it. And I think that after you build that type of environment and you look back and they're being sold, and you look back and you think, I built that. That was my work. That to me is fulfilling. I don't know if you get that same feeling like being CEO and board member, but it's an amazing feeling.
I'm a builder, man. I love to build. I love seeing something we've built and seeing a customer use it, or see a lot of customers use it, and think to myself, man, we played a part in that. We did this, or I had this role to play in that. So yeah, when you were talking about kind of the way companies learn, and sort of this almost violent event of having ransomware. I mean, going through that, for the individual company, it could either be cathartic, or it can be just the opposite of cathartic. Fire the CIO, we'll be okay. He did something wrong. She did something wrong. We did something wrong. And, I think I've seen a little bit of both. It's hard, because there's no such thing as an inexpensive event like that. And B, learning from that, culturally learning from that, not just reading the paragraph and memorizing a couple words out of it, but culturally changing. I've seen a couple of companies, I'm sure you have too, Mike, where they say to themselves, well, how can we become different? And that opportunity exists all the time. But boy, is it hard to get the time to do that. So,
and it takes more than one person. It takes a shift in mindset of many people to make that kind of change, I think.
Yeah, everyone, it's a team sport. If they're not part of the solution, they're part of the problem. And no matter what their job is, like I said, I my biggest saves in the industry, and I've had some, I think, big saves, have all been because somebody said something to me. Hey, somebody told me that we do this, or somebody told me that they did that. And, one of the things I used to do with my CISO and his team, and later her team, I used to make them go to our stores. Everybody in our CISO team on the security team had to go to a store, 6 stores a year, and they had to try to take something, or they had to try to put something on a POS, because we had what we call a hot stove rule. And so getting them out and making them literally, these aren't people who necessarily, feel talking about a comfort zone. They all liked it. A couple of people, got the sheriff called on them and stuff like that. It became kind of a cool thing for them. But they had to go to the stores and they had to try to take a POS. And you would be shocked. Each one of them, I think we had 6 people on the team. Each one of them had to go to 6 stores. We had 640 stores. And, they would walk in and say, hey, I'm Mike from IT. I'm going to grab this server real quick. And I'll bring one back out from my car in just a minute. And they would take the POS out of the cash wrap, take it to the car, take a picture of it, and send it to me, of course. Look what I got, because I had the stores and I had technology. And so the moral of the story is they would do that, and no one ever lost their job. No manager, nothing like that. It was always like, listen, you guys, make them. We had a 2-factor after this thing where we lost our keys. We had a 2-factor, no matter what, phone call. No one would do anything without calling you back from that point on. And so what they would do, they would walk in and say, hey, I'm with corporate. I'm going to sit in the back room for a minute. hook into the hub and the switch and do whatever they wanted to, or add stuff to the hard drive. We were using Tripwire, and they would add stuff to the hard drive, take things away from the hard drive, and wait for Tripwire to throw a flag and all that. But you can be part of your corporate organization, and regardless of what your role is, without it having to be this horrible event like a ransomware, or Lord help you, somebody really comes in and takes everything, and you don't know it for a year or so. So we used to do a lot of things like that, and having them, like we used to give, time after time, we would have these brown bag lunches where, we would take somebody and say, okay, you're going to talk about containers today. They'd be like, containers? So you want me to talk to containers to a merchant? I'm like, absolutely, I do. They need to understand what a container is. And of course, they didn't retain any of it. I mean, what does a merchant have to do with, using containers for operating systems or something like that? Right. But it was just that interaction, and getting to know each other. And so I think that opportunity still exists way, way, way before you've got to start saying words like red team and ransomware and Bitcoin and things like that. You have the opportunities right now. Just get up and go talk to somebody. Go to your CEO and say, hey, I watched this podcast, and this guy was talking about things that maybe you don't know, maybe I don't know. Why don't I have enough money to buy a server? And you tell me, and I'll tell you. CEO probably doesn't. Shouldn't, especially a modern CEO, and I do distinguish that. And you do too. Yeah. A modern CEO should say, "Yeah, man, sit down, let's talk. Yeah. What do you have? What do you think we should? I may not be able to do it. We may not be able to buy a server this month, but I want you to know I want to hear you. It can happen, and break down that wall of thinking that because they're the CEO and you're fresh out of getting your CISO, your CISSP. I had to, again, same CEO, I had to explain to him why we needed a network. He's like, what do we need a network for? He goes, I can get my email now. It's like, listen, we're using Token Ring. And it's like year 2002. I was like, listen, I don't know. We were buying NIC cards from eBay. I mean, it was crazy. And, then we had to take the RJ45 and strip out the wires. It was nuts. So anyhow, we went from that to being a multi-billion-dollar company with an amazing network. And we did that, Mike. We did that through communication, man, not through threats, not through jumping up and down and saying the world's going to come to an end. And if you don't give me more money, if you don't send me to DEF CON, I can't protect you. None of that's true.
And that goes back to the brown bag lunches and stuff like that. So I met Chris at a Bank of America brown bag lunch. He came in as a keynote speaker, and I was just the new guy and was giving a brown bag talk about hacking. And that's how I met Chris.
Wow.
But even talking about like going up to your CEO and just having that communication, even if it's a topic that you know nothing about and you just listen to it.
All right, we are back. Next up, we've got DevOps Unbound. In this one, which is titled DevOps Got Me Through It, we have hosts Alan Schimmel and Mitch Ashley speaking with Tracy Reagan from Deploy Hub, Brian Dawson from the Linux Foundation, and Stephen Chin from JFrog, and they talk about ways in which DevOps helped their organizations pivot and other organizations pivot at the top of the pandemic when seemingly every organization needed to digitally transform almost overnight. It is a fascinating conversation. Let's get to it now.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of DevOps Unbound. DevOps Unbound is a bi-weekly video series sponsored by our good friends at Tricentis, and we discuss relevant topics in DevOps or regarding DevOps. This is our last show for 2021. It's hard to believe we've been doing DevOps Unbound now, I think for about a year and a half, but this year went really quickly, doing 2 of these a month. So we probably did about 24 or 25 of these during the year, and it's been great. We picked, sometimes you save the best for last. We picked one of our favorite panel configurations for this one, featuring 3 really, really good friends of ours who I personally like to have on my shows and talk because they're smart and they always have great things to say. Let me introduce you to them. I'm going to kick it off with my friend Stephen Chin. Stephen, of course, is from JFrog. But Stephen, why don't you introduce yourself, a little of your background?
Yeah, so I'm VP of Developer Relations at JFrog. Been doing DevOps before it was even a cool name for it. And I think that the evolution of what we see really has gone from something which was bleeding edge. We were just figuring out how to release continuously, get processes, get collaboration with operations, to something that every company is doing. And it's just a matter of figuring out the right tools and processes and dodging the latest open source supply chain security attacks. So yeah, glad to be here.
Hey, Alan, I know it's not my turn yet, but I have to jump in that Stephen's name henceforth shall be Neo.
He does look a little Matrixy, yeah.
Well, bit. The new movie coming out.
It's coming out. I went to see West Side Story, but I'm looking forward to The Matrix. Next up is my good friend Tracy Reagan. Tracy from the CDF, from Deploy Hub, and other places as well. Tracy, welcome. Give us a little background.
Thank you. I want to first thank the Techstrong team for inviting me here, and Tricentis for really sponsoring these events. I really appreciate being part of these panels. It's a lot of fun. Yes, I am Tracy Reagan. I am the CEO of Deploy Hub. My background has been in, we used to call it ALM, SEM, for pretty much my entire career. I started, I was a programmer who got drug into learning to write build scripts. I was one of those kids who liked to pull things apart because I wanted to see how they fit together. One time I pulled my mother's stove apart. She wasn't very happy about it, but it was really cool to figure out how it worked. So I've always been interested in how things are configured, and I am pretty much a configuration management, specialist.
Thank you. I hope. Thank God it was an electric stove or a gas stove?
It was gas.
Oh, geez. Well, you made it through. You're here, so I guess it didn't end too well. Well, our third panel member is also a favorite of ours. We've been interviewing him, following him around from organization to organization. It's our friend Brian Dawson, who's with the Linux Foundation. Brian, introduce yourself.
Hey, Alan, thank you for having me. Always a ball. As a matter of fact, you not only interviewed me, I've sat in your chair. We swapped out the interviewer chair at times live at conferences. But yeah, as Tracy said, I always love talking with this group. It's perfect at the end of a year while things this year haven't been perfect. We've been on an upswing after 2020. Some cool things have been happening. My background is as a developer. I like to say I'm a technologist. And my career is largely focused on optimizing software development and delivery, all the way from the tools or technology level, working on GPUs at Sony, up to the human level as I've engaged around what is, as Stephen said before, it had a formal name, this DevOps space. So I've had the privilege of working from QA to development to services delivery to sales to marketing. So I'm proud of the fact that I've developed a 180-degree panoramic view of what the software development and delivery process looks like. So I'm DevOps at heart, Alan, and I love to talk about it.
And through and through.
Yeah.
All right. Last but not least is my co-host for DevOps Unbound. He's the CTO here at Techstrong Group, as well as principal analyst at Techstrong Research, Mitchell Ashley. Hey, Mitchell.
Only thing I'll add is my deconstruction of my dad's tube-based GE-TV did not go so well going back together. I didn't become an SRE or a sysadmin.
Yeah, or a TV repairman for that matter. Anyway, Mitchell,
but you got a new TV out of it, probably.
We did.
That was one good part. Mitchell's still paying for it, but yeah. Anyway, guys, so the topic for today's show is kind of how lucky we are to have DevOps, right? And what a role DevOps has played in this whole digital transformation and this whole journey that we've been on. Well, we've been on it for years, and certainly over the last year or two, it's digital transformation has become imperative. And, the question is, could we have done it without DevOps? And has DevOps done what we thought it would do, should do, and could do, and what else needs to be done? And I'm reminded, I just published a new article. I've been writing again on DevOps.com after a while, and I published a new article, Reflections, a DevOps Christmas Carol, where I'm visited by the ghosts of DevOps past, present, and future. And, thinking back to when I started DevOps.com to today, where I see titles, has DevOps hit the wall? Is DevOps still relevant? Do we still need DevOps? To what the future may hold here. And, I'm old enough to know that reality never matches the hype, right? And when things get overhyped, that's creates an even bigger gap from reality, right? The more hype it gets, the bigger that gap is. And DevOps was hyped like few other things I've seen in technology over the years. So of course there's a gap. But as we sit here today, I'm interested in my panel. What do you folks think? How relevant, how successful has DevOps been in helping digital transformation, in achieving maybe some of the goals that we all thought were possible, breaking down silos and stuff like that? I'm going to go in reverse order, and I'm going to ask Brian if you don't mind kicking this off.
No, I'd love to. There's some conversation that we had a little earlier, probably before broadcast started. We still have a long way to go. So to make no illusion that the journey is complete. But I'd say it's been extremely helpful. Now, of course, keeping in mind that digital transformation is kind of this broad swath of space that means more than just software development and delivery, or even software development and delivery based activities. But I'd say that DevOps has directly helped with the pace and the continuity at which we can deliver the innovation required from DevOps transformation, but it's also helped in a lot of other areas. A few C's. It's helped with the C-suite. It's helped with culture, building a culture of collaboration. It's helped drive a focus on customers. And as you said, ultimately, it's helped build connections on multiple domains, not just with the direct software development and delivery contributors, but other stakeholders like business and technology, right? Or the company and customers. So I can go on with alliterations, calling out how DevOps has contributed directly and indirectly, and I think it'll continue to do so.
So I'm going to live up to my my Neo reputation that Mitch gave me.
You're going to go in the Matrix.
Yeah, and be a little bit controversial here. So maybe DevOps is over, because now that we have cloud computing, now that we're moving everything to architectures which require less less hands-on maintenance. Or maybe we're done. I think the new machine overlords, which have AI automation, observability, they're taking care of things in our new digitally transformed cloud infrastructures. Do they really need DevOps to be successible in the future?
Absolutely.
I think I just saw a rabbit hop by.
Yeah. I think DevOps may, as a term, as a specific thing we focus on, may decline, but I wouldn't overemphasize necessarily the traditional operations component of DevOps, right? You are still going to have to conceive, plan, package, deploy in whatever form that takes. I do expect, though, Stephen, as cloud native development matures, yes, there's less infrastructure management. Yes, eventually, I think some more things will be inferred in terms of packaging and deployment. But there's always going to be people making software, and there's always going to need to be a culture of DevOps to bring that to fruition.
And there's always going to be a team of people who have to manage that. And let's visit the ghost of DevOps past. We've always done DevOps. We've just never named it. How many times in my earlier part of my career was I called because we had production problems and I was on the application team, and because I did the build and I understand the deployment, I was the one that got called. It wasn't the operations side of the house for my application. Now, what digital transformation has done, it has turned us into, we're not managing applications so much anymore. In the future, we'll manage components. So everything will be component driven, including pieces of the infrastructure. So when we think of an application now, it's going to be a set of components. It's going to be your microservices. It's going to be your database updates. It's going to be your key values. It's going to be updates that you need to make to your namespace or your pod, or even at the cluster level if your team owns their own cluster. So we're going to continue with having a conversation between the development teams and the operation teams, but the development teams now are going to be building components. So maybe we call it co-ops instead. That's not bad, right? Maybe it'll turn to something else, but we still have the role and a trusted partner on the development side. Now we call it an SRE, and somebody on the operations side who has the correct user access if they need that to pull the pieces together. I think it's harder in a digital transformation because it's component driven. We're not managing a monolithic and we're not putting it on a server. To be quite honest, that was a lot easier because every team had their own collection of servers and don't mess with it. They knew all of the pieces and parts, and the operation team would tell them, hey, we're going to do an upgrade on Windows. Is that okay with you? And they'd say yes or no. So it is changing. Digital transformation has a more moving parts to manage, and the role of DevOps will continue. We may change it. We love our acronyms. We love our fancy names. We totally do. We're a really geeky community when it comes to that. But when you boil it down, it's the same thing. We're just calling it different, and really the job changes as the underlying technology shifts.
Yeah, and I was being a little bit confrontational, but again, visiting the ghost of Christmas past. So I worked in a company where we basically had everything running on a on-site mainframe, full tape backup system, complete. This was the data center of the 80s, and we had a really strong operations team. And when we started moving to the cloud, they were all afraid that they were going to lose their jobs. Like they were like, oh my God, like our jobs and our livelihood is maintaining this data center. And what we did is, as we moved to the cloud, nobody lost their jobs changed. Right now, rather than them flipping tapes and managing systems physically, what they ended up doing was maintaining, observing, keeping that 24/7 operations and supporting the development teams on remote servers. So I think that as you said, Tracy, as technical folks, we keep changing our jobs, changing the acronyms, changing the titles, but we continually find ways to add value. And that means reinventing ourselves, learning new technologies, and transforming ourselves as we digitally transform.
And which is why I've always loved this industry, because I get bored with things really easily, and you can't get bored here.
I think the idea you mentioned, we love our terms and our names. I think we've gone from DevOps being the shiny new object, the squirrel moment, to something that, to your point, recognizing that it is things that we've been doing for a long time. But I think the difference is, I think it's elevated sort of the rising tide lifts all boats. I mean, to me anyway, I have had more confirmation of things like testing is being risen in its visibility and is seen as in its importance. We talked about observability and tracing and SRE. When did developers talk about that stuff? Never, right? And those are hot topics. Those are great things. And so I think it's really helped bring people in and elevate what are all the important functions when we started DevOps at a place that we aren't going to need those things because the developers will do them all. So to me, that's really what's fundamentally changed.
And if you may, on the flip side of that, Mitch, it just triggered when is the CEO and the C-suite commonly been talking about mean time to recovery, right? And mean lead time, right? And key metrics around the software development and delivery process. And I think DevOps has really helped with building a bridge to establish an important conversation, not only between dev and ops, but between the engineering teams in the business, or technology and business. And that'll be a lasting impact. I do want to say, I love, Stephen, transforming ourselves while we digitally transform. Such an important component of it.
Spirals within spirals.
Yeah.
So guys, a couple thoughts. First of all, you know what? Old technologies never die. They just fade into the woodwork, right? They fade into the stack. And that's what I think's happened with DevOps, is it's part of the stack. It's a given now. It's not cool necessarily. It's not new. It's not, oh my God, is it real, not real? That was part of this ghost of DevOps past. 8 years ago, I was fighting with people whether or not there was such a thing as DevOps, right? And is it only for big enterprises, or is it only for startups? Is it only for developers or ops? And what the hell does security got to do with it, right? To paraphrase Tina Turner. But, so here we are, all of that, we don't argue about that no more, right? Fundamentally, it's helped. Would we have SREs but for DevOps, quite frankly? And has DevOps transcended just that? Not Kathmandu. I forgot what the official Wikipedia thing says, but the bringing together of Dev and Ops. So you have a bigger function of Dev and Ops that includes security, includes some business function, certainly includes, is SRE part of that? Is how tightly linked is cloud native with DevOps? Observability, is that part of this kind of DevOps way of life, if you will? Down here in Florida, a lot of the boats have Salt Life. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Salt Life. You see it, stickers on all it's about people who are into fishing and that whole boating, ocean life, right? It's DevOps life.
Yeah.
Right?
It is. It's a family. These are not, the more that we begin to understand that the whole process is one big family. I mean, the whole DevOps movement really tried to push it. We started creating families within application teams. You had an SRE who is now the trusted partner to operations, who was working closely with the development team. An amazing shift that we should have done a long time ago. But there was such a wall between dev, test, and prod that those silos, it just wasn't seen that you could break those silos down. They're broken down now. We need to keep those silos down. We need to continue breaking them down where they are. This is why we have trouble with doing continuous deployment from testing to production, which we have to fix. Come on, people. We have to get that done. But it is a big family, and that's never going to change. That is always going to be the case, regardless of what we're writing, regardless of the technology, whether it's low code, whether it's microservices, whether it's serverless. We still have a big family. We still have to worry about security. We still have to worry about testing. We need to automate all the pieces and parts. We need to do centralized logging and reporting so everybody has visibility into everything, even before it goes out to production. So while we see, the term DevOps might be getting a little tiring. There's too many ops in my world. There's ML ops and there's GitOps. Everybody had to add ops after DevOps got popular. But whatever it is that we do, it's a family function. And the more that we see each other as one cohesive group and not in silos, the better off our end users will be, because we'll be able to deliver a much better product faster and really deliver the business agility that our end users are demanding.
Have you been talking to my wife, Tracy? I'm buying a new boat. I wanted to name it Sea Ops, and she said enough ops.
No, don't do that. Please don't do that.
We did it.
That's enough ops. It's enough ops.
Enough ops.
You have enough back problems, Alan. That's not
good. Yeah. Stephen, I want to throw it back at you, though, Stephen. JFrog has this notion of liquid software without versions, right?
Yeah.
Can you have liquid software without DevOps?
So I think when you look at kind of where we're going with this, we early on at JFrog we developed the notion of liquid software, which was a continuous flow of software delivery. And really, this is getting to what DevOps accomplishes, which is DevOps accomplishes cleanly taking software and new releases and then streaming them out to production. And if you think about that as the problem space, there's a whole bunch of other things which enter into it. So we've talked about how do you observe the systems, how do you continuously deploy to the systems, how do you maintain them in cloud architectures? And I think the biggest one, which is kind of hitting us all in the face right now, is how do you secure these systems? How do you make sure that you actually have security across the entire pipeline? And I think that the past couple of years we've seen a huge acceleration, not only in DevOps and digital transformation, but also our hacker friends have been really bored at home. They've actually made a lot of advances. So we've seen in the past year some huge supply chain security attacks, which basically have transformed the way which we look at security as an ecosystem. And I would argue that if you have folks who are getting so good at infiltrating our systems with clandestine open source malware attacks and other ways of breaking into operational systems, DevOps is basically a fundamental requirement for how you secure your systems. Because if you're not doing continuous deployment, if you don't have very short times on releases, if you're not able to respond quickly, if you don't have your developers also looking at security information, how can you possibly secure things? And our research team just found a huge new exploit that they published a couple days ago in NPM, where they found a bunch of heavily obfuscated malware done by folks who obviously are well-funded, very smart people, and very hard to discover. So, I mean, these sort of attacks now are moving up the chain, and it's affecting our development lifecycle.
So annoying.
No doubt about it. Well, so annoying. They never miss an opportunity.
So is that good? I did that whole thing without saying SolarWinds once.
Yeah, great. No, I get it. I get it. Well, I'm not going to say it either. So, but you're 100% correct, Stephen. This is this continuum that we find ourselves in. Look at an organization like the Linux Foundation, right? Brian, I know you're fairly new to Linux Foundation, but how long is the Linux Foundation? Didn't they just celebrate, was it their 20th birthday?
Well, so we just celebrated the 30th anniversary of Linux. Right. The foundation, which came out of the merger of two other open source consortiums, has been around for about 17 years.
You know what? So we weren't talking DevOps per se, or by name 17 years ago. But, yet Linux Foundation remains relevant with CI/CD Foundation and CNCF, even the open mainframe, right? With Zoe and stuff like this DevOps has squirreled its way literally into the foundation, no pun intended, of this whole thing, right?
Yeah. No, there is. So I've given a talk recently about the reciprocal relationship between DevOps and open source. And when you even go to DevOps Days and read the blurb on the founding, why DevOps Days was founded, and it calls out that it was inspired by open source methodologies. You go look at The Cathedral and the Bazaar by Eric S. Raymond, and you look at some of the tenets of open source development, and they directly align with the tenets of DevOps, right? So yeah, when you look at Linux and you look at the founding of Linux, first how the concept was brought to bear publicly and collaboratively. You look at the process for driving kernel development, keeping in mind all of this was sort of in advance of The Cathedral and the Bazaar, if I'm getting my timeline right. But there's been a tight relationship. Now, we've seen an interesting shift even within the foundation itself, right? So the Linux Foundation has always provided key services to impactful open source projects, right? From legal to CI/CD infrastructure, as we now call it, or release infrastructure, domain services, web services. But we also realize, kind of out of this modern DevOps movement, that we need to enable self-service software delivery to our open source projects. So hopefully every open source project can scale to be Linux 30 years down the line. So we've created a tool set called the LFX platform, right? And that is all about everything from giving transparency into security and security fitness and the ability to remediate it for software developers. But when we talk DevOps and other stakeholders, or the cloud native movement, to being able to secure our infrastructure with the click of a button. All right. So, not only have they fed in and inspired each other in the past to get to where we are today, but open source and DevOps are still tightly paired together as we move forward into what's next.
Yeah. Speaking of the Linux Foundation, one of the new efforts which you guys have recently kicked off, the OpenSSF, is also something which Tracy and I are both involved in. So JFrog just upgraded to a premier sponsorship.
Oh, nice.
Deploy Hub, I believe, is joining soon as well. And I think if you look at kind of the focus of the Linux Foundation, I think they do a really good job of being on the bleeding edge of where the industry is headed to and the sort of problems and challenges which we all need to solve in our software delivery pipelines. So I think if you look at the Continuous Delivery Foundation, which Tracy and I have both been on for a while, that really solves a huge problem in the DevOps space to get your software deployed. And looking at OpenSSF, this is, I think, kind of the next frontier, is how do you secure your software pipelines? How do we help open source projects upstream to improve their security, to avoid the sort of vulnerability attacks I was talking about at NPM, JS, and also PyPy, we found a bunch of big security holes in. So how do we secure these critical services, which our entire software pipeline is on and underlies our DevOps infrastructure?
Yeah. Yeah, you actually highlight, again, I talk about the DevOps Trinity. Sorry, Mitch. But OpenSSF, the Linux Foundation, and then ultimately LFX kind of model the people, process, and tools portion of it. So I'm sure you and Tracy are aware that out of OpenSSF is also going to come further development of Alpha and Omega, right? The process of Alpha identifying vulnerabilities, and then Omega, the process of and I'm going to fuzz it up a little bit, of actually in a repeatable way remediating them. And so it's bringing people together, establishing a process, and then putting tooling and technology in place to help support that.
And then bringing data together. We are now in a phase of software development that we can turn data into intelligence. And that's where I get excited. That's what Deploy Hubs, we're hoarding as much data as we can about all these different components, because the more we have, the more data that we have, the more intelligent our DevOps process can be. we should be at a place right now. I mean, the CDF is working on an event-driven CD pipe, kind of a listener to integrate with CD pipelines. We should be able to take data and start making it more intelligent, just like the LFX tools out there. There's a ton of data in that. So if we look at the ghost of Christmas futures or DevOps futures, I'm betting on really using some of this data and turning that data into DevOps intelligence, because it's time that we do that. We don't have to do everything manually. We don't have to make decisions manually. If we can create self-driving cars, come on, we can create a self-driving DevOps pipeline that can make good decisions, and we get out of the whole approval process and the gated processes. So our software is really liquid, and data is going to allow us to do that.
Mitch, you're on mute.
What's amazing about data is there's secondary and tertiary uses of it. I mean, we've done some research around governance and compliance. We already have seen measurable results of their recognition of having that data, access to that data is impacting their ability to respond to compliance issues as well as reporting. I think there's something else that's really happened that's, I felt the sort of change in the force, if you will, and that's open telemetry, another Linux Foundation project. Here is an open source project, not just changing the industry because a lot of people are using it. So it's in widespread use. It's people. There's our wonder dog here. It's because actually the vendors are banding together to saying we're not going to have proprietary agents. That's not where we're going to differentiate. This is something we can all benefit. Let's really add value in where we add value instead of everybody doing the same thing and forcing 30 agents to run on every app, every system. But it's very cool to see something become that widespread. And I don't know if it'll be Linux, Brian, but it kind of has that, all right, it's got that kind of momentum.
Yeah. Wow.
And we need to be able to have, when it comes back to data, which is, I think about it all the time, and I'm totally a dreamer. Imagine if, JFrog found a vulnerability that everybody needs to know about. How do we know who's using that? Wouldn't it be awesome if we could just blast out to every single person that's been impacted, every single application that's been impacted, and say, hey, you got a vulnerability and it's happening right now. We need to be able to get to that. It's totally possible to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd say, Tracy, first I got to go back because just in my mind when you spoke earlier, I thought Sister Sledge. I have "We Are Family" running in the back of my head this whole time. Sounding a little nebulous, I do think what DevOps has given us in terms of digital transformation, and where we go back to it being similar to open source or Linux Foundation or CDF, is kind of the bus. It's kind of become the connective tissue across related functions. And it'll change, it'll morph, different processes will plug into it, tools, technologies, etc. But it's about that connection that we've made. Now, Tracy, that was triggered by, what if we knew? We used data and captured data to know who was using components that vulnerabilities were exposed in, which then leads me to, I don't know if people here are familiar with SPDX. An open implementation, an open collaboration around an implementation of a software bill of materials, right? This is, again, a concept that has been around forever, at least in terms of bill of materials. I know years back, many companies were struggling with delivering commercial solutions to capture the components and the steps and the activities across the software development lifecycle. And here we go. We get a bunch of invested individuals coming together and defining a true standard of SPDX that then gives us a common framework to go out and start to capture that data. Now, as I clumsily trying to loop it, which then Stephen, empowers us to deal with this next challenge, security, right? Empowers us to bring things like OpenSSF to bear more universally. So I'm kind of talking myself into it, Alan and team. I'm like, yeah, has DevOps helped digital transformation? Abso-freaking-lutely.
Absolutely, it's right. I think, will it continue to play the role that it has?
It will change, and it will continue to be more and more important. but it will change.
I think it's part of our DNA, right? It's part of how we do things now.
Yeah, it has to change. But right now, everything's based around monolithic. And that's, like I said, everything's moving. We're slowly moving to component driven. No more monolithic. Links are done at runtime. It's the scariest thing ever.
And I think to Stephen's point, JFrog talking about software being liquid, I think it's all liquid. The stack is liquid, the tool chain, all of that stuff, sort of this idea of, it's this now and it'll stay that way for the next 2 weeks. Now it's probably not. Pick any point in the software stack or the tool chain. I think it's a very dynamic world we're in and entering into.
No doubt about that. I will tell you one thing, though, as I sit here today, right, the end of 2021, what got me into DevOps 8, 9, 10 years ago was security. I really thought it was the best hope for security. It was our last best hope, Obi-Wan, right? And as I sit here in 2021, I still think it's our last best hope. I think what we've done in DevSecOps and security and DevOps has changed the equation in security. It already has. It will continue to do so, and we will do more. And things like the OpenSSF are great.
Yeah.
And it'll continue. It'll continue.
Yeah, we needed it 10 years ago.
Yeah, it's starting.
Happening.
It's happening now. It's happening in a much broader way. People are thinking about it in, security. Security started with an auditor, right? Somebody who occasionally went through and audited or wanted to see if you had an SBOM in a build. It was pretty minor, but we have grown a lot. And even the change, even Kubernetes and microservices obviously offers a new level of security. Poly databases offers a whole different level of security. So our whole infrastructure and the way we're writing software is going to improve security. But because it's so many pieces, it's going to be harder to manage.
All right, so I think we found the answer to why we still need DevOps in the age of cloud transformation and automated machines and all this stuff. Because guess what? Those machines have a lot of viruses, and we need DevOps. We need to shift left with security. We need things like the OpenSSF to be able to address those, to be able to release patches, release fixes for vulnerabilities, to transform our processes. So, yeah, I think you're in a good spot, Alan. Maybe COps wasn't such a bad name.
No, it was already shot down by the boss. So, you know what I mean? I had a great logo picked out too. It was SCA with the O as a gear. PS.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. No, it's done. That ship has sailed. No pun intended. Anyway, guys, we're about out of time.
We're going to do a live roundtable on a similar issue, sort of has DevOps hit a wall we're going on. That's coming up. Check out DevOps.com to register for that live roundtable, because if you agree, disagree, have comments on this out in the audience, you'll have a chance to participate in that live roundtable. So we welcome your participation in there. But for now, hey, Brian, Tracy, Stephen, first of all, thank you not only for today, but for your support throughout the years in all that we do here on Techstrong and Techstrong TV and DevOps.com and Container Journal, Security Boulevard, and the rest. Here's to a happy and safe and healthy holiday season and new year in 2022. We look forward to having you guys all on again and continuing our conversations.
Thank you, and likewise.
Thank you.
Yep.
Love you guys.
Everybody.
Mitchell, you want to just Happy New Year, everyone. Mitchell, you want to wrap?
I think we got a great wrap. I think I can't say anything better than these folks have. So, period.
All righty.
Hey, many thanks to Tricentis for sponsoring DevOps Unbound. We will be back with more Unbound in the year to come, as well as this live roundtable next week. But for now, this is Alan Schimmel, and we're out.
Hey everybody, happy Tuesday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with the headlines. First up on DevOps.com is an article that looks at some of the challenges of automating DevSecOps and the ways organizations can overcome them. In the last few years, DevSecOps has been widely adopted among organizations looking to get proactive with their security. Traditionally, development teams would continuously implement and deploy new applications into the enterprise, and security was basically bolted on at the end. However, as threats posed by cybercrime have increased, organizations have been shifting left with their security and weaving it into the beginning of the development lifecycle. This offers significantly increased security benefits and means software vulnerabilities can be identified and remediated before they are exposed to the enterprise. But that takes additional time. As a result, many organizations are also looking to automate their DevSecOps processes. This article details the challenges associated with automated DevSecOps and how they can be overcome. And we have news from Stacklet, which has added collaboration capabilities to its security and compliance platform that automatically groups related notifications, routes them to the right stakeholders, and integrates with existing workflows and collaboration tools. The Stacklet platform is based on Cloud Custodian, an open source project that provides access to domain-specific language that enables an IT team to employ YAML files to manage compliance as code. That approach makes it easier for organizations that have embraced DevSecOps best practices to comply with a wide range of mandates by shifting responsibility for achieving compliance further left toward DevOps teams. The latest version of the Stacklet platform adds communication capabilities that leverage cloud resource configuration and policy metadata to automatically route notifications and escalations. Customizable notification templates and context for teams to collaborate either via email or integrations with Slack, Microsoft Teams, and Symphony Instant Messaging. The Stacklet platform can also trigger external workflows in tools such as Jira and ServiceNow to track issue resolution and generate reports. And we also have the latest from Red Hat, which has made a private preview of Red Hat Ansible automation platform available on Microsoft Azure Cloud. The company believes this is the first step toward making it possible for IT teams to use the IT automation framework across multiple clouds. The goal is to make it easier for IT teams to bridge multiple IT environments using a common framework to automatically configure everything from operating systems to security platforms across a hybrid cloud computing environment. Interest in IT automation has soared as the number of workloads being deployed in the cloud and on-premises environments, IT environments, have steadily increased. Many organizations can't keep pace with the rate at which applications are built and deployed because they are unable to hire and retain enough IT staff. But writing a playbook to automate any process requires a fair amount of expertise that many organizations lack. Red Hat is also making news on Container Journal, where we report the availability of Red Hat OpenShift Data Science Cloud Service for OpenShift platforms as a field trial. Red Hat OpenShift Data Science aims to make it easier for organizations to build and deploy applications infused with machine learning algorithms on a Red Hat OpenShift distribution of Kubernetes. That platform can be accessed as an add-on to Red Hat OpenShift Dedicated or Red Hat OpenShift Service on Amazon Web Services. Like most cloud services, IT teams will be able to consume machine learning tools and frameworks through a t-shirt size model. Red Hat OpenShift Data Science provides organizations with a managed service to develop, test, and deploy machine learning models without having to set up and maintain a platform themselves. Red Hat is also providing access to hardware and software acceleration toolkits from Intel, with similar offerings from NVIDIA planned. And we look at container native storage and how it can defy data gravity. One of the biggest challenges DevOps engineers face is data gravity, which is the pull of accumulating data into a black hole and the resulting lack of data mobility. Data gravity thwarts data movement and organizations' ability to keep up with dynamic customer demands, deploy applications seamlessly, and produce efficient CI/CD pipelines. Now more than ever, IT professionals need to implement innovative data services solutions to combat data gravity and avoid the disruption of DevOps pipelines. To achieve this, they need to understand the strain data gravity puts on data mobility and how they can overcome it. This article takes a look at the ongoing issue of data gravity and offers some suggestions for reducing or even migrating the issue via the use of container-native storage solutions, which pool physical media capacity and present virtual volumes to applications. Advanced CNS eliminates data gravity by enabling instant movement of data to and from any cluster anywhere and providing instant access to any point in time. All right, over on Security Boulevard, we look at the shift in cybersecurity awareness in 2021. As the year winds down, we look back and see the meaning of cybersecurity awareness changed in some pretty meaningful ways. Comprehensive employee security awareness training helps organizations to reduce risky behaviors, build a security-first internal culture, and prevent cyber attacks. But what does security awareness mean? It's different today than what it was a year ago. This article looks at what now comprises cybersecurity awareness based on the events of the past year and how organizations should be changing their approach to cybersecurity from implementation to training to reflect this new level of awareness. And we look at SASE's role in securing and enabling 5G networks. The buzz has been growing around 5G multi-access edge computing as the new networking standard that promises faster speeds, greater bandwidth, and optimized mobility as the technology has moved from concept to reality. 5G network edges are designed to support various use cases that will prove extremely important to organizations across the board, including video analytics, location services, Internet of Things, augmented reality, optimized local content distribution, and more. As more organizations consider their own rollouts and environments, there are important deployment and security considerations they must address. 5G introduces a whole host of security threats and vulnerabilities, such as kernel bypass, DDoS attacks on 5G service interfaces, and exploitation of software or hardware vulnerabilities, leading to zero-day exploits. With 5G, it is extremely important for organizations to consider security solutions that can enforce consistent security posture across public cloud, hybrid cloud, and on-premises deployments, or any combination of these environments. All right, that's it for the headlines. Please check back with me on Thursday when I'll have a fresh batch for you. Until then, I hope everybody has a great day, and please, whatever you do, stay safe.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Techstrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon. I'm here now with Orion Casetta, who is the Senior Director of Product Marketing over at Cycode. Orion, thank you so much for joining me today on Techstrong TV. It's a pleasure to have you here.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Excellent, excellent. First of all, I have to give you props for your plant in the background, but that aside, tell me a little bit about Cycode.
Sure. So Cycode is an end-to-end software supply chain security solution. So essentially what we're doing is we're helping you to plug attack vectors across your entire SDLC from end to end and integrate with all of your DevOps tools and infrastructure so you have kind of one place to go for complete visibility, security, and integrity of your code.
That's great. That's great. It's very, very important these days too, especially when we're talking about the security of applications in development and that need to shift left with security in the DevOps lifecycle. So, interested in hearing about a survey that you guys recently put out, which is the Software Supply Chain Security Priorities Survey. Did I get that title right?
You did.
Excellent. Yay. All right. So let's talk about this survey. Is this something that this is the first time you guys have done this survey, or is this something that you've done in the past as well?
It is the first time that we did it. It was kind of prompted by, this year has been, the year of the software supply chain attack. Starting just before the year, there was SolarWinds and Kaseya. And then throughout the year, there's been, Excellion, PHP, and a number of others. And so we decided to delve into that a little bit with a survey.
Great. So I actually, I'm a little scared to hear some of the results that have come out of the survey, but I'm sure there's some good stuff in there, both negative and positive. So let's talk about some of the kind of the big results that you guys discovered as a result of the survey. What are the things that kind of stood out to you guys?
I would say one of the biggest ones that stood out, we asked our respondents essentially, so for your DevOps tools and infrastructure, so things like, your build servers, your SCMs, your cloud environments, in your organization, do security teams have ownership of those tools or not in terms of, securing them? And I think, the big surprise there was that, on average, 79% of organizations, the security team was not involved in the security of those tools, which was a big eye opener.
And that's actually kind of telling when you think about the shift left in the DevOps tool chain. The fact that security doesn't sound like it's involved in the conversation at all. So are these? Do you think there's a direct parallel there between the issues that we've been having with organizations and their software supply chain issues and the prevalence or the inclusion of security personnel in that DevOps motion, if you will, DevOps processes?
Yeah, I think it's definitely one of the impacting factors. I would say there's a very good parallel that could be made with what's going on now and kind of shadow IT from a decade ago, right? So in shadow IT, IT and security wasn't necessarily involved in figuring out what apps are installed on your computers. Nowadays, if you think about development, processes, essentially you have teams who pick out the tools that are best to do their job. And it's usually, geared around efficiency. And so as a result, you have your development and engineering teams that are picking out and using tools, and security is not necessarily involved in those decisions. It's kind of like shadow dev. And in this world, you've got a kind of a blind spot. Security may not know what tooling exists. They weren't involved in implementing it. They don't know what's happening in it. And so it's hard for them to put security controls around it. I think that's one of the many factors that's at play.
So we keep having this conversation about developers kind of starting to own security in the application development process, but it should. It sounds like that shouldn't be the expense of excluding security in the conversation or the security folks in the conversation. So, do you think that there's some sort of disconnect in really what we're asking developers to do and what they think people are telling them what to do? If that makes any sense. So,
I think I understand that.
Okay.
Essentially, I think that. It should be a joint ownership. It is a little bit unfair to ask developers to, the ins and outs of security frameworks and implications of, the code they're working on. Their job is not necessarily that, right? At the same time, security people want to meet them halfway, but I think that they don't necessarily have the tools that can bring, their oversight and processes into dev without impacting them. And so I think, a way to kind of meet in the middle might be more things that bring security checks into developer workflows in kind of a non-intrusive way.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. And did you guys get any sort of sense as to what organizations are doing to help that process along? Are they investing more in these security tools? Are they looking for maybe some DevSecOps tools that are out there that can kind of help bridge that gap? Or what did you guys find out from the survey results regarding that?
Absolutely. It was actually a very interesting part of the survey. So one of the questions that we asked was essentially, where are security teams spending their time and money today? And what we found is that the vast majority, 77% of investment was on production applications and protecting source code. But a very, very small percentage of time and money was being spent protecting kind of these newer DevOps tools and infrastructure. It was like, 7% was on infrastructure as code, or 6% was on containers, et cetera. And then we kind of paired that with another question that was, what is the largest unmet AppSec need? And there, essentially, we saw, kind of an interesting take. We saw that essentially the largest unmet need was protecting source code. But right after that was dealing with code tampering. And then, the most interesting part after that was essentially that for that area, that long tail of responses, that's the DevOps tools and infrastructure, there was, an increased desire to meet the needs of securing, those areas of the SDLC. So essentially the takeaway to me is that, teams want to be spending their time and effort on this, and they may not have the ability to do that today.
Well, that makes, so I'm sure there are a number of reasons why that is. It's not just the tools and technologies, but it's also the people. Do we have the people to actually fill those roles? And to your point earlier, it is unfair to ask developers to handle the security, all of the security around an application in during the development process. But we're also facing a dearth of security folks and developers really to be able to handle that and do that and do it effectively. So do you think that we're going to see more organizations investing in technologies to kind of maybe fill that, I don't want to say fill that gap, but kind of be in place of the people who they can't seem to find to hire to do that?
Yeah, I'm always cautious to say that we're going to replace people. Augment them is the way I like to think about it. But yeah, according to the survey, roughly 56%, just over half of organizations were looking to implement security controls, and the vast majority of them were looking to do it over the next 6 to 9 months. So I do think that is happening.
Yeah, I think automation can play a huge role here, but also, I guess taking a step back, we talk about DevSecOps all the time. So I guess naturally, I assume that organizations are really farther down the path than a lot of them actually are, and it's still a brand new concept for a lot of organizations to be embracing now, and for them to be able to do it effectively, they do need to invest in technologies that allow them to do that. So do you see in the next year, kind of based on the survey, but also basically what you guys are seeing in the market space, do you think that there's going to be a greater adoption of DevSecOps practices in the next year? Or do you think that it's still going to be kind of a learning curve? We're kind of still on that low end of the learning curve, and it's going to be a while before it really is adopted in the industry.
I think that there's a desire. I think that we need more tools that can help security people to bridge that gap. I definitely think that these software supply chain attacks are kind of giving a tailwind to that motion. One of the interesting things that we found was we asked how critical is it to protect different types of tools and infrastructure. And so we went through, source controls, management systems, build tools, Kubernetes, infrastructure as code, and kind of went through the pipeline from left to right. And we asked, both security people, IT people, engineers. It was very interesting when we compared the engineers' responses to those of security. Essentially, the engineers were saying like, hey, my source control, my build tools, that's mission critical, and if you think about it, that makes sense. That's their day-to-day. They know the value of the intellectual property there. If you ask the security respondents, they were on the complete other end, much closer to production. And, they were thinking about, protecting production applications and cloud infrastructure and whatnot. And it seems like there's a disconnect there. And I guess bringing it back to your initial question, it feels like there's a strong desire to move left. And, I think that's embraced by both halves, but the security people haven't necessarily embraced that as much as, they are thinking about doing so. Had they really truly embraced that, they would have been thinking, about higher criticality all the way up until we get to source, right?
Yeah, well, it's never been in their purview before. It's always been, security's always been kind of that bolted on thing right at the end before things hit production. So it's possible that there's got to be a shift in mindset among security folks to really think about security from the onset. And I think, to your point, once they're able to kind of wrap their brains around the fact that security doesn't start at the very beginning, I think we'll see greater adoption of DevSecOps. But considering the fact that security has kind of often been considered that kind of land of no, if you will, or the department of no, and the application developers are hesitant to include security because they think of it as just one big barrier. No, you can't do that. You can't do that. I think we're going to have some meeting in the middle, if you will, and a greater understanding of by security of what developers do, and a greater understanding by developers of what security does and can do for them. So I think we're probably going to spend at least another good 6 months or so kind of feeling each other out, if you know what I mean, from a security and a development perspective, before we can actually achieve DevSecOps nirvana, if you know what I mean. But I think we still got a little ways to go. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see, and I think just the sheer number of supply chain attacks that we've seen this year is going to accelerate that timeline. But still, it's definitely not going to be an overnight process.
I definitely agree with you there, and I think that probably we're likely to see more software supply chain attacks in the future. If you look at our survey respondents, so 90% of people thought that. Essentially, that there would be an increase in the future. But if you look at more other external reputable sources like the EU cybersecurity agencies said that there were 4 times as many software supply chain attacks this year versus last year. If you look at Gartner, they're predicting a 3-fold increase over the next 4 years. I think that this is a problem that's here to stay and probably grow until we can really find a way to have a kind of a complete solution that's both involves developers and security and kind of meets in the middle.
Yeah, I think it's a maturity thing. I think organizations eventually will get to that point where and some will do it faster than others, obviously, and a lot of that depends on their DevOps maturity and how open they are to adopting new processes that enable security earlier in the application development life cycle. Orion, thank you very much for having the conversation with me. I think this is a great survey. If folks want to take a look at the survey results, is the survey freely available to them on your site?
It is, absolutely. You can find it in our resource section at sitecode.com.
Sitecode.com. All right, great. Well, thank you again, Orion. I do appreciate your time and your expertise. It's great having the conversation with you.
It's been a pleasure.
All right, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more Techstrong TV coming up, so stay tuned.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more. ContainerJournal.com is operated by MediaOps Inc., the team behind DevOps.com, Digital Anarchist, SecurityBoulevard.com, DevOps Connect, and DevOpsDozen.com.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Techstrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with Dave Gokenauer, who is the Senior Director of Did I get it wrong? Gokenauer?
Yeah, no, you got it, Gokenauer.
Okay, all right, great. Senior Director of Cybersecurity over at Ensono. Dave, thanks so much for getting on the Zoom and having the conversation with me. I appreciate it.
Sure. Thank you for having me here.
Great. So I'm interested in talking with you a little bit about the cybersecurity skills gap, because I'm having this conversation with a lot of folks these days, and everybody's got a different point of view, and I'm interested in getting yours as well. But I thought maybe we could start by you introducing us to Ensono.
Sure. So Ensono is a global managed service provider. Our right now, our strong suit is mainframe, where I think the second or third largest mainframe outsourcer in the U.S. But we're also big in cloud services, both Azure and AWS, and we have a presence in Google Cloud as well. And then also just on-prem, open system management, infrastructure management. Then we've also got a consulting service that, clients can draw on.
All right. Well, you guys are busy then. That's good stuff. Lots of stuff happening. That's interesting that actually I hadn't thought about mainframe in managed services. So that's a really interesting angle there. Niche there. So I want to talk to you a little bit about cybersecurity, which interestingly, you didn't really mention in Sono, but certainly every managed services provider's got to have some sort of security angle. So interested in kind of seeing what you guys are seeing in the space, because as I said, we are as an industry, it seems like we are really experiencing a skills gap, and some might argue that it's really nothing new, but the spotlight is being shined on it now because of the pandemic and all of the security incidents that have occurred over the last almost 2 years now because of the pandemic, and in tandem with the pandemic, not because of, but just, because we're just not really, we don't have a lot of the same security controls in place, and folks are a lot more cybersecurity aware. But I'm interested, since you guys are kind of in there in the trenches, do you guys see that there really is a cybersecurity skills gap and a dearth of talent in the space? You're laughing at me, so I know what the answer is.
Sure. For sure. Yeah. So, no, I didn't mention security, when I talked a bit about Insono, but, clearly every single client we have, that's, if not their number one topic, it is certainly in the top 3. And, so we've got, security services that we also provide to clients, if that's something that they engage us to provide. Mainframe security, we have a pretty large mainframe security team. We've got what we call a cybersecurity team, which is non-mainframe. Mm-hmm. And, we do all the things that, you might expect: vulnerability management, malware protection, things like that. And, as Insono grows, and take on more clients, the demand for security services also grows. And so we're constantly struggling to, maintain a security skilled workforce, that can handle these demands, and it's not even as our client base grows, it's as our clients get more sophisticated, as they get more acclimated to having outsourced to Insono, they come to us for more security services, and we struggle to, get that talent in that, that can support them. And one of the other areas that I think a lot of people, don't always think about it, at least for an MSP. We have a number of clients that are in-country only type clients. So, you can only support them if you're in the US or if you're in, the UK and so you can't look at then a global support model, when you have those kinds of situations. So it just puts a little bit more pressure, on the local teams.
That's an interesting perspective there. And I have to ask the question, and you may laugh at me again, and that's okay. But it seems like, because we have been hearing so much lately about cybersecurity and all of the the threats that are coming along, it seems like we should be farther along in our staffing for security. And so I wonder, why do you think this is such a problem now, and why has it become such a larger problem? It seems like of late, is the the technology just moving so fast that we're not able to keep up with it, or have we done something wrong along the way to not attract the right kind of people into cybersecurity?
Yeah, boy, that's a good question. Yes, the threats have gotten more sophisticated and they are coming faster. So, the demand for security talent is growing. Companies that maybe, back in the day, didn't really think about, that we need a dedicated team or even just a dedicated person for security. Now they're finding that, in fact, they do. And they, in fact, need, some fairly sophisticated expertise. And I don't know that, I know that universities have increased the number of universities have increased that, turn out security professionals. I don't know that when people go into, a college program, if they necessarily think security, that's a profession that they could go into. And I don't know if they necessarily think about that. And maybe that's, an area that needs to improve a little bit. But I think it's really just, the demand has really outstripped the supply. I think it's just as simple as that. I would tend to agree with you. At the same time, I also think that there are actually a lot of people out there who are very eager and willing to get into cybersecurity, but don't really have the not the wherewithal, but they don't know how to actually do it. But they're very eager to learn. They want to get into it, and I think we're kind of stuck in this mindset where if you haven't done security, you're not going to know how to do it, and we're not going to waste our time hiring you and trying to teach you because we simply don't have the time to teach you. You got to be able to put boots on the ground from day one. And I think we're missing out on a lot of talent opportunity by not acknowledging the fact that there are a lot of people out there who are very willing to learn and want to learn about cybersecurity, but nobody seems to be giving them a chance. Yeah, and that's a good point. So yes, I think there is some of that. I'll be honest, I see it within Insono, and try to combat it, because if you have people that are interested, especially if they have a technical background, you can train them in security. That's something that it's, I don't want to say it's easy to do, but it sort of is, from an operational perspective, managing tools and, things like that. It's no different than some of the technical skills that they've already got. And so that is actually something that Insono has been doing is, as we open up a new job rec, to hire somebody, we look internally first. And if somebody internal is interested, we give them the shot, and train them up to, in the area of to think like a security professional.
Yeah.
And that's helped. But I will say, we, as you might guess, with our growth and all, we do have a growing demand for security talent, or even just technical talent, and we don't get the necessarily the strong response to some of those open job recs that we'd like. So we have to go outside, and that's where it gets very difficult to attract talent. Because it's so competitive.
Right. Yeah. Well, yes. I mean, cybersecurity salaries, I know, are increasing rapidly, and a lot of organizations don't either don't want to or just can't pay the salaries that a lot of folks are commanding these days. And also there are other things, that the pandemic has kind of brought to bear with regards to where people want to work, where people want to live. And and really at the end of the day, those quality of life issues that have been kind of simmering below the surface, and the pandemic kind of, forced them to the forefront. Do you think that organizations have done enough to kind of encourage cybersecurity within their organization, either hiring internally, such as what you guys are doing over in Sono, or just bringing in the right talent that might not necessarily punch all the holes, if you will, or tick all the boxes, but has enough of a some sort of baseline knowledge that could enable them to fit into a cybersecurity position with minimal training or hand-holding, if you will? Or do you think that the organizations have been traditionally just too stringent about making sure that all of the candidates meet every single one of the qualifications that they list on their job descriptions?
Yeah, it's probably both. Depends on the organization. I know from an Insono perspective, we try to bring in anytime you hire somebody, you put together the job description and, you post it out on the internet, if that's the route that you go. And you know that you're not going to get somebody that will, meet every single one of those bullets. Yeah. What you look for is somebody who, maybe meets some, and depending on how many and what the job is, more maybe, more of those bullets need to be met than for other type jobs. But you also look for the person that, okay, they're not perfect, but because nobody is, but, we can, that person, has the skills, the knowledge, the talent, the smarts to pick up what they don't have, and the desire. I mean, that's a big one. To pick up and learn what they don't have, what they don't know, and they'll fit into the organization. I know that other places that I've been, it was the requirements, had to be a little bit more rigid. The person had to be closer to fitting that job rec, and so if you were smart, you tailored the job rec to be a little bit more open, so you'd get more candidates. But I think really, if organizations, are going to be able to fill their need for security talent, they are going to have to look at individuals that are willing to learn, eager to learn, and maybe don't check off all the boxes, but but that's okay, as long as you can see that they've got those, I'll just say those smarts, to pick up what it is that the job requires.
So I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's all right.
Okay. I was going to ask you, if you had your choice of requirements for a security person that you're looking to hire, what do you think would be the ideal candidate for you?
The ideal candidate would be, for me, somebody that has the ability to learn, but has the desire to make security their profession, and this is going to sound kind of silly, but and has a lot of common sense, because that's one of the to me, one of the key ingredients in, in the security profession, because, a lot of people think of security, they're just, their hands on the keyboard, looking at monitors all day long and, chasing threat actors. But the truth is, you spend a lot of your day getting involved in a lot of different things, and within the organization, a lot of projects are going on. They need security input. People have questions about, we'd like to, we'd like to shut down these firewalls and just let clients come straight in. Is that a good idea? You have, I know that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but you have things like that. And, you have to, ultimately provide your input on those kinds of questions. And so, the people that I find are the most successful in dealing with those situations are the ones that just have, built-in common sense. They might not have the technical skills to know, but they know then to turn around and ask some people, hey, this is what's going on. What do you think? This is what I think, but what do you guys all think? That type of thing.
Yeah.
So I would say those kind of at a high level, those are the basic things that I look for when I'm interviewing people.
Yeah, and I think those are very good qualities. And I firmly believe that a little common sense goes a long way. And there's just not enough of it being used in business these days because everybody's so focused on analysis and metrics and the bottom line and this and that. And we don't really have that intuition anymore. People don't go with their gut as much as they used to. And I think that's actually a very good quality to have, to trust your gut. And with something doesn't seem right, chances are it's not. But yeah, and it's in cybersecurity, obviously that can go either way. But to your point, understanding the implications of doing something such as switching off a firewall. Yeah. It's kind of an obvious thing that, but still recognizing that, that every action has an equal and opposite reaction.
Right.
Yeah, that's something that I don't think a lot of people think through these days. And I think also soft skills, like just the ability to communicate with other people and not be afraid to ask those questions and provide guidance when necessary. I think those are very important qualities as well.
It is, and that actually, when I was just sitting here, I was thinking, there is really one other good quality that, I do look for. And that's, there's really a few, but, one is the communication skills. And not everybody has them. And, and they do just fine in the security world. I hate to stereotype, but they do tend to be the ones then that they're more the head down engineers and,
sure.
And they're key to a successful security organization. They are critical to that. But I do look for good communication skills and, but also somebody that's willing to stand their ground, and not be bullied. I'll just say, because that's something in the security world that you're always kind of viewed as the roadblock, right, for whatever somebody wants to do, and so those communication skills come in, and that you need to help people understand what you're doing. It's a risk. You're trying to prevent a risk. You're protecting the organization. There's some alternatives, and to be able to get some of those points across without just kind of folding. When the person across from you starts pounding the table and saying, this is the most important thing we have going on in the company, and you're the roadblock, and you have to stop it. Because there's always ways to, get to a solution that everybody is fine with. I know that's a pretty easy thing to say. Sometimes it's harder than you might think it is, but usually you can get there.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think the ability to compromise, but without putting the organization at risk, I think is a great quality to have, no matter what where you are in the organization and what department you're in, whether you're in cybersecurity or marketing or whatever. I think that's always a great quality to have. I feel like we could kind of go on and talk about this all afternoon, Dave, but I've already taken up too much of your time. But I do want to thank you very much for having the conversation with me. And I do believe, we are getting to a point industry-wide where we do recognize the importance of cybersecurity and the need to have talented people in cybersecurity who don't necessarily fit the mold, if you will, of what a cybersecurity person is and should be. And we should, if nothing else, outlaw the hoodies in cybersecurity, because I think they go a long way to help kind of further that stereotype of bad cybersecurity person. So.
Yeah, that I can't disagree with you there.
Yeah. All right. Well, then there we have it. What will be the next fashion faux pas in cybersecurity? But that's another conversation for another time. But for now, Dave, thank you so much for your time and having the conversation with me. I really enjoyed it. Thanks again.
Sure. Thank you.
All right. All right, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more Techstrong TV coming up, so stay tuned.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
All right, rounding out today's show, we have The View with Vizard. In this one, Mike Vizard speaks with Benji Weinberger, who is the CEO of Toolchain Labs, and they discuss why developers need an easier open source build system. Interesting conversation, interesting topic. Let's roll it now.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Benji Weinberger, who's CEO for Toolchain Labs. They make a build system that's open source that traces its lineage back to Twitter. Benji, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
There's been a lot of build systems, so whatever possessed you to build another one, and what problem are we solving?
Great question. So we're solving the problem of the developer workflow more or less from when you hit save in your IDE through to when you have an artifact ready for deployment to production. So everything from resolving and downloading and installing third-party dependencies, generating code, compiling, running tests, formatting, linting, debugging, packaging, all these steps that today are typically managed somewhat standalone, and there's a sort of motley collection of underlying tools that handles each of these. And when I talk about a build system or a developer workflow system, I'm referring to the orchestration tool that will run, manage, install, and synchronize all of these other tools for you and cache their work so that you can get significant speed-ups by not doing the same work over and over again. Mm-hmm. So that's where we're at. And you're right that there are many, there has been an evolution of many tools in this area. So the open source project is called PANTS, P-A-N-T-S. And it is part of that lineage. It originally was something that my co-founder John and I worked on internally at Twitter. The current version of Pants is very different from that old version, though, and it is very different from many other systems out there in that it was designed very much for present-day use cases at a variety of teams, of engineering teams at sizes from 10 to 20 engineers up to hundreds and even thousands of engineers. Whereas a lot of the existing systems on the market were either designed for the internal needs of a single company or for one specific use case in one specific language. And so we're really trying to bring a lot of those ideas from earlier systems into contemporary use cases, while also making things much, much easier to use.
I think you're being kind. I think a lot of people don't even have anything that approaches a build system. They're kind of just manually stitching all this stuff together. What has been the challenge in kind of getting developers to actually use a build system? It seems like, to me, sometimes they're more complex than the actual project at hand.
This is a really good point. So when we look at what we're competing with in the market, obviously there are other tools out there and we see those, but by far the predominant situation we find in the market is a collection, a sort of hacked together collection of make files and shell scripts and complacency and dissatisfaction. And in many cases, people are not always aware that there is something better and there is something that will allow them to be far more productive out there. And this is particularly noticeable in the Python world. We launched the second iteration of the Pants system we launched last year with a strong focus on Python, because in the last 5 to 10 years, Python has gone from that language you use around the edges of your repo to the core language in many domains, web application development, DevOps, and most prominently data science and machine learning. People are now building large repos with a lot of Python code in them, and there was no tool out there that really understood that or was able to work with that. And so one of the reasons it's great to be here talking about this is to let people know that there are now with Pants, there is a modern solution to the kind of woes that you have when you try to take tooling for Python that was designed for small repos and apply it in a growing modern repo environment.
What's your current assessment of where are we in the maturity of DevOps? We see a lot of people talking about shifting more responsibility left to the developers, but sometimes I talk to the developers and they're like, I already got enough to do. I can't quite manage all this as it is. So, what is the appetite among the developers to take more control over the operations per se?
I think it really depends on the tooling. If you ask developers to take on more responsibility and you do not give them ergonomic, easy to use, easy to adopt tooling to do it, that is almost an unfair ask. And certainly people are going to be very reluctant to go there. But if you look at, for example, asking one of the things that gets shifted left a lot is security concerns. And that's very important. And thoughts about security, locking down your code against supply chain attacks and other types of attacks has to be taken into account earlier and earlier in the development cycle. And you need tooling that can support those kinds of efforts. And so Pants, for example, one of the things we put a lot of thought and effort into is supporting lock files. So you can completely lock down all of your external dependencies rather than arbitrarily fetching whatever the most recent version of something on a public code repository is, because that is obviously fraught with security danger. So if given tooling, I think it is reasonable to encourage more and more of the DevOps responsibilities to shift left. I think conscientious engineers want that in general, but they have to have the tooling that allows them to do it.
How automated do you think that all of this can get as we go along here? And because it feels like we're kind of still in the early stages of automating this process. So, what should people expect as you look into the next year? How much of the heavy lifting will they do versus how much will the software do it for them?
I think increasingly the software will take on more and more of the heavy lifting that has to do with where the complexity is due to the dependencies of your code. It is very difficult for human beings to reason about complicated dependency graphs, and it is much more straightforward for algorithms and for systems to do so. So to the extent that a lot of the manual work is driven by trying to figure out how a certain change somewhere affects things downstream from it, that I think we can see more increasing automation. It's a little hard to peer into the future far beyond that. But I do think more and more tools that are wise about dependencies and able to infer your dependencies and infer how they interact with your changes, that I think will become increasingly automated and should.
To that point, we are starting to see people build more microservices-based applications, and there's a lot more dependencies involved in that. So do you think that shift will force people to look for more build tools and things that will help them navigate that challenge?
Absolutely. I think the hard problem to me that I've experienced in my career is that managing changes is hard and managing dependencies is hard, and managing the two of those together is very, very hard. So understanding how changes flow through your dependencies and how dependencies affect your changes and the interplay between those two things is incredibly difficult. And the microservices are very often stymied by exactly that problem. Okay, I've made this change. Which of my 500 services need to be redeployed? That today, solving for that is still somewhat in its infancy. And I think we'll see a lot more interesting stuff happen.
We hear a lot about artificial intelligence, and I don't think that AI is going to be writing code for anybody anytime soon. But do you think that AI has an opportunity to play a role more on the back end and automate some of these functions?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. I honestly, when it comes to, I'm a little old-fashioned here, but when it comes to verifying the correctness of software workflows, of dependencies, and how they transitively flow through your code and through your changes and vice versa. There's an argument to be made that a human will make mistakes and an AI may make fewer mistakes. I still aspire to certain levels of verification and correctness that I'm not sure an AI that necessarily will have false positives and false negatives can be relied on to achieve yet. That said, the state of the art in AI is just dramatically impressive, and so who knows?
How much of software development in your mind these days is a science, aka engineering, versus a craft, where the developer is kind of trying to create some unique substantiation of an idea that they have? And how do we balance those two things? Because I feel like sometimes we're trying to force everybody down this factory model, but developers perceive themselves maybe to be more of an artisan. So how do I kind of strike that balance?
That's a great question. I love using the phrase, the craft of software engineering is one that I use a lot in reference to our company and the work that we do. And I describe it as having a focus on the craft of software engineering. It is very much a craft, in my opinion. Obviously, we interact with the maybe more hard science of computer science all the time. But I think of it somewhat in the same, and I'm no expert on, say, medicine or surgery, but when you're a surgeon, the hard science of the biology of the human body is the world in which you both literally and figuratively operate. But there are different ways to do surgery, and there are different preferences, and they are very much based on your experience and on the situation in front of you. And I do think that experience and best practices and establishing a body of best practices and tooling that can support those best practices really supports the craft. I do think that best practices are necessarily, it is a plural term, there are many of them, and knowing when to apply each one is a very individual thing. I think a rule that we have internally at our company when you do code reviews is not when you're reviewing someone else's code, the prism through which you evaluate it is not, would I have done it this way? Is this objectively, in my opinion, the best way to do it? But is the code base improving over time? Does this change contribute to an improvement in the code base? And so that's where I think multiple craftspeople can collaborate by sort of respecting and recognizing that we all have slightly different senses of what we think the right way to solve a problem is.
Do you have any advice as to how to go about doing that? Do I lock all the engineers and the developers in a room until somebody comes out and says, this is what we agreed to? Or is there some set of motions that you've seen people implement that over time allows them to kind of culturally get over this hump?
It takes a lot of putting people in a collaborative mindset. We, for example, don't sort of implicitly rely on the code review principles I mentioned earlier, but we actually wrote them up in a document, and we made sure that to socialize that document and for everybody to understand what their role is. I think literally getting people into a room, once the pandemic allows, does actually help, because we just tend to generally have more understanding and more empathy when we are physically proximate to people. I think it is a hard part of one of the underappreciated difficulties of software engineering is it is at once very individual and also very collaborative. It is necessarily collaborative because while every one of us thinks we're great, none of us can actually get all the work that needs to get done on our own. Collaboration is absolutely necessary, but we've all, as software engineers, also experienced those moments of a highly individual flow where hours go by feeling like minutes and code just pours out of our fingertips. And it is balancing those two is tough. I think it requires really good management, something that unfortunately many engineering organizations do not put a ton of focus on. Has in the past at least been a bit of a trend in the tech industry for management. That's for, Coca-Cola and IBM. We're too cool for management. And I actually think focusing on good management practices really matters.
All right. Last question. Do you think that the way we manage the process has been fundamentally changed by the pandemic? Because I don't think developers are going back into the office in droves anytime soon. Talked to one fella, he told me he was an introvert and he'd been practicing for working from home by himself since he got started. He was perfectly content. So how do I organize these people who emotionally just don't want to go to an office?
I don't know. It's a question that I wonder about myself. Part of me really misses an office and wants to go back to one soon, and part of me loves working from home. So that's a really good question. I think we're all struggling with that somewhat. I think there's a lot of talk about hybrid models. There is an office, you don't have to come into it every day. There may be days that are designated as collaborative days where we expect people or planning days or meeting days where we expect people to come in, and beyond those days, maybe it's more optional. I think there's also a lot of people dispersed around the country and even around the world during the pandemic, and many of them are not planning to come back to San Francisco or New York or the tech centers. Many people got hired in remote locations who were always there because suddenly they could, their Zoom worked just the same as anyone else's, so they could be. So there are challenges in just even getting people into an office when they are physically far apart. So that was a long way to say that I don't really know.
All right, guys. Well, you heard it here. Casual Friday is going to be replaced by Office Monday. We'll just show up one day a week at the same time, and then everybody can go on their merry way, right? Hey, Benji, thanks for being on the show. It
was a pleasure.
All right. And back to you guys in the studio.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
All right, that wraps up another Techstrong TV broadcast. Hope you enjoyed today's episode. Just a quick reminder, we have a new show on Thursday, and then we have another new show the following Monday on the 20th, and then we're going to wrap it up for the year, take a short hiatus and enjoy the holidays. We'll be back after the first of the year. I believe on January 4th will be our first new episode of 2022. But please come back to us on Thursday and check out that fresh new broadcast, because we're putting it together, and I got to tell you, it's going to be a good one. So I hope everybody has a great day, and please, whatever you do, stay safe.